Just giving myself a round of applause before I even start. Let me introduce you to my microphone, Blue. He's got googly eyes thanks to my brother who was here a while ago. He put these on like years ago. All right, now that we've got that out of the way, I got a video request a couple weeks ago asking about how to optimize your hard drive storage, or in plain English, how do I remove all the crap from my hard drive that I don't need? And that's a pretty easy trap to get into, especially nowadays with disk space storage being as high of a capacity as it is. But after a while, you will notice maybe that your computer's starting to slow down, and that might be because of a full hard drive. It doesn't necessarily always involve a full hard drive, but it does certainly have a play in it potentially. It is a very common issue that does come up here and there whenever I'm working on computers. One great way of making sure your hard drive space is tamed, let's just say, is using a disk cleanup utility, which is literally called disk cleanup in Windows. And what this does is it sort of looks through your hard drive and it tries to see if you have stuff that's just sitting in there that you may not necessarily actually need, that isn't personal, and you could just get rid of it. And while the disk cleanup utility is a really good tool, it doesn't clean up everything that you might necessarily want off of your hard drive. There might still be a lot more junk floating around in there that you still want to take account for. One of the first things that immediately comes to mind is your downloads folder. A lot of times people neglect that and they don't delete files after they're done with it. You know, you download a file that is a picture of a cat that you want to send to somebody. You download some important document. You download a program that you needed to install, but now it's installed in the computer. You don't need the file anymore, but it's still left over nonetheless. And that's kind of the issue that a lot of people run into. And it's the first thing that I look in whenever people are complaining about disk storage space is look through your downloads folder, but look through it. Don't just delete everything in it, because there might be some personal stuff in there that you might, not want to part ways with. So be careful when you take that advice. But oftentimes, I'll get a little more in depth with what I talked about earlier. When you go to install a new program, like let's just say iTunes, Adobe Photoshop, anything really, Google Chrome, it leaves behind what's called a .exe file, which is important at the time of you trying to put the program on the computer. But once the program's on the computer, you don't need it anymore. It's no longer necessary. Oftentimes, a lot of people think that you need to keep it on there in order for it to work still, and that's not entirely the case, like 9 times out of 10 nowadays. There are some exceptions to that rule where the actual exe file is the program itself, but that's very rare, and that's very specific software that you kind of have to know what you're doing anyways to be using it in the first place. But for the most part, modern software, it has that component of you install it, it's on your computer, you can get rid of the exe file once you're done with it. Now, I'll get into why sometimes a full hard drive doesn't slow down the computer, and that's because you may have, let's say, a laptop or even a desktop that has what's called solid state memory on it. Solid state memory is quite a bit of a different technology than our classic hard drives. So I'll start by just talking about our old school hard drives. We still use these a lot because the storage capacity on them is much greater for a lot cheaper. But kind of the disadvantage to hard drives is that there are physical disks in here that it has to find files physically on. This is one of those magic tricks that we humans created, where even when the curtain is lifted and the secret is revealed, it's still magic. It's still like, how in the heck does this work? So I'll get into it just a little bit, just to kind of scratch the surface of why I find this so fascinating. But essentially, this disk is spinning around. And while it's spinning around, and that's this beautiful little mirrored platter is what I'm talking about here. When this is spinning around, these readers are trying to look across the entire landscape of this disk. And that's how it retrieves files. As while this is spinning, this is going. I'm a nerd. Anyways, this hard drive gets slow after a while because once it gets chock full of files, then this reader has to go across the entire disk looking for stuff. And so it's physically having to find files, and it's taking a much longer time because of the physical limitations of this. Now, solid state drives are different because they don't have any moving parts in them. So that's why they last longer and require a lot less power to operate. So when we talk about solid states being totally full, a lot of times that isn't really what's causing the computer to slow down. It's some other issue, such as too little RAM or failing RAM or what have yous. Hopefully this is a good overview at the very least of how to keep your files in line and maybe why it may or may not slow your computer down. But if you have any questions regarding possibly your computer maybe being slowed down by being chock full of all these files, you're more than welcome to give me a call or send me a message, what have you, and I'll reply to you as promptly as I can to answer any of those questions. All right, well, thank you very much for watching. You have a wonderful day. Toodaloo!